Welcome to SVE Demo Global Final Judge Panel. We have created an amazing judge. Thanks all the judges who participate in our 7 demo events started from July. And today is our final judges. I want to ask a few questions to our judges to give their perspective to the future. The first one is that what is the current, means next 1 year during the pandemic, what's a venture ecosystem, particularly toward startup, looks like? Maybe you can use like 1 minute, maximum 2 minutes to summarize your answer. 1 minute.
So a question a lot of entrepreneurs are wondering is, how is this COVID pandemic going to affect them? From a venture capital point of view, what we recommend is, one, don't apologize for COVID. Don't make excuses using COVID. We all know about COVID, so do not apologize or make excuses. Two, do not pretend that COVID is going to last forever and that this is going to be a change for the world forever. It may not. But what we really want you to do with regard to COVID is acknowledge it and explain how it is that your business is still going to thrive and be wildly successful, either in spite of or because of the acceleration effect of COVID. So acknowledge COVID, but we're investing for the long term. We're not investing for next year. We're investing for 5 and 8 years out. So do not apologize for COVID. Do not focus on COVID, but acknowledge COVID and show how your company can still be successful.
Thank you, Bill. Chris?
I think it's all about what your purpose is and whether it's still valid. If your purpose is either consumer facing or B2B or B2C, if it's infrastructure, if it's cloud, is it more valid now? Is it less valid? If it's less valid, you've got some serious thinking to do. Don't try to raise money for something that's not valid, because the short term will kill you. The long term can make you, but the short term can kill you. So just be sure that you're on solid ground short term. Short term won't make you. It can only kill you. So once you are sure you're doing something that has long-term validity, figure that out, create your story and your narrative if you don't already have it, and be confident that COVID is irrelevant or even a positive for you. One of my companies is doing management systems for electronic scooters. You would think it would be killed by COVID because nobody's on the streets. But in fact, they pivoted to a slightly longer term pipeline, and they've now got customers in cities with metropolitan authorities that want to prepare for when people can return to the streets and they're healthy again. So it's all about thinking it through.
Thank you, Chris. Next one.
Want me to go next?
Go.
So I think in the COVID times, I would say there are I see 3 kinds of companies in my consulting assignments. One I call COVID positive, where COVID has been good for them. I have a couple of companies that have done really well because they're able to either reduce their costs significantly or their revenue is still continuing to go up because there is a lot of remote work and they help in that process. The second type of businesses are COVID negative, where, like we just heard that you got to refocus, right? So I have one company which was in the event business, and obviously event business dried up. So they went towards virtual events and other things. So that's something where I think you should wait to raise the money until you are ready. But if you are COVID positive company, I think you should just go ahead and try to do it because, you are in the rising stage, and right now there is money to be had, and there is no better time but to get the money when you can get it. The The most difficult situation is the companies that are in the COVID neutral phase, where business is sort of affected, but it's not positive, it's neither negative, and they still have to have a struggle in order to make sure that their business continues to do well. And so for them, the challenge is, how do you transition your sales and marketing exercises so that you can actually increase your business? And for them, it's much harder to raise money also at this time, unless and until they've figured out how to improve their sales motion.
Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, I'll go next here, David, if you want.
Go.
Yeah, I think what I've seen in COVID and the pandemic is really, I would say, a shock to the system, right? Where, as the saying, never waste a crisis. I think when there's a crisis, there are always opportunities. So what I've seen companies that really are focusing on is digitization, automation, things that can really help the future workforce, as mentioned earlier. Think in terms of really moving the needle forward, if you're right. Those are opportunities that I see are actually gaining traction, for instance, during COVID. Not to take advantage of it, but to leverage this and pivot toward it so that it can really help people and organizations. You have to think through also the distribution. Think about your customers and the type of challenges that they have to wrestle with. And what are the ways that you can help them be able to pivot in this world, as well as how do you reach them, right? How do you provide what we call a relevant message that is very, I would say, salient to their challenges and their business model in terms of how you work, and pivot toward that. And I think you'll find opportunities. May not be easy, but there are opportunities out there. So.
Thanks, Canice. Scott, you want to go?
I have a street sweeper going through the neighborhood right now. Do you mind if I wait a couple moments? Or maybe somebody else could talk and then we'll let it go. Life, interfering with life. Here we go.
Yeah. Yes, I'll say that I want to pick up on Keith's thing. We tell companies now, purpose before problem, problem before solution. And so don't come to us with the solution or the problem, but tell us about the purpose, back it into the problem, and then talk about the solution. But that was Keith twigged that in me. The main thing I was going to say is, we like companies that are upfront and honest about uncertainty, and are willing to tell us that, there's things that they don't understand right now. Uncover what the uncertainty is, categorize it, talk about it with us, and then tell us, what are you going to do to be proactive? Give us the 5 scenarios or the 8 scenarios that might occur. Tell us what percentage likelihood you think they might occur. And then, if each of them happen, if X, then Y, and then how you're preparing for each scenario and how they might impact your business plan. And, when you can show us that you can work through uncertainty, we're not as afraid to invest in you during uncertain times.
Okay, thanks. Sean, you want to?
Thanks, Pavan. No, I would say that this is an entrepreneurial moment. There are a lot of businesses out there today in the midst of COVID that are having extraordinarily difficult times adjusting based on their business models, but entrepreneurs and startups by definition are about change and opportunity. So I think this is a time, even if it requires adjustment in your original intentions, not to be pessimistic, but in fact to be optimistic and flexible. We know that there will be enormous opportunities coming out of the current situation. And as usual, not everybody is going to find them or make them. But for those that do, an entirely new landscape is being created, essentially an accelerated digitalization of everything, trends that were underway before, but are now going to become the dominant trends. And I think for those who can perceive the directions that those are going, and make a convincing case that they have the solution for real issues or opportunities that are being created. This is a time of great opportunity.
Thanks. Scott?
Okay, let me go now. I think COVID is a different lens than we're accustomed to seeing. We've had real estate crises, financial crises, .com plus. This one, though, is affecting literally tens of millions of lives, perhaps hundreds of millions of lives by the time that it passes through society. It's a way for entrepreneurs to focus on their higher purpose. So do we really need another advertising app? No. Maybe we need something that's going to help focus ourselves in the area of improving the human condition. And so I encourage entrepreneurs to revisit every assumption that they've made about their purpose in life and look towards how they can contribute to society rather than just simply building wealth. The other aspect that I'd say is that this is a great opportunity to help entrepreneurs separate users from customers. Users use your product or your solution. Customers actually pay for it because they're recognizing value out of your solution. And so think about how you are serving your customers, in fact, your highest value customers, and look for ways that you can serve them even better or in different ways. That will allow you to increase the value that you're providing, and it will make you more attractive to prospective investors.
Thanks, Scott. David?
Okay, great. Thanks a lot for all the great information. Now, this round is optional. You have 30 to 40 seconds. If you have a crystal ball, and what's the post-pandemic and looks like, make sure finish within 40 seconds.
Anyone?
Go ahead.
Bill, you're on mute.
So what does the post-pandemic world look like? Well, I think the reality is the post-pandemic world is going to look pretty much the way the pre-pandemic world looked. We're going to see some differences at the margins, but don't assume that this is going to be globally transformative in terms of technology and customer preferences, the way we live and work. It will make a difference at the edges, but do not pretend that this is a sea change that is going to change all of the rules of business and enterprise.
I'll go next. I think as much as I agree with Bill that the changes will be at the edges that we'll all be able to see, I also feel that this pandemic might change how we look at enterprise sales forever, as an example. Because enterprise sales has always been in person with a very expensive sales resource. I think that might change. People might accept, in fact, I just read a survey yesterday that $500 to $50,000 to a $500,000 sales, customers are willing to look at it as a self-experience as well as not having to deal with a person calling on their door. So I think that might be a change that maybe it was overdue for a while, but I think we'll see this change post-pandemic is what I think. Before pandemic, we used to say you could never do a sale any more than $50,000. Maybe that number will change to $500,000.
Keith?
I can't really imagine post-pandemic. I think a lot depends on the length of the pandemic as to how baked in the consequences are. So if the pandemic lasts another 2 years, it's going to be a very different answer than if there's a vaccine in the spring, which I personally am a skeptic on. I think it's very unlikely there'll be effective remedies in 2021. I think we'll still be dealing with this in 2022. I think Joe Biden might be very unpopular by then. If that's all true, this new normal will extend and deepen and become more rigorous. So if I'm wrong, then I would say we won't return to normal, but lots of things will, like transport, for example, or leisure accommodation, things like that.
Scott?
The pandemic may last 1 year, it may last 1 decade. We don't know. So life post-pandemic and investment climate post-pandemic, I think people are going to be very focused on how they choose to spend their time. And industries that can provide for enriched experiences, some of which are suffering right now, travel and hospitality, leisure, entertainment, all of those, I think are going to benefit greatly.
Okay, James?
Yeah, in the post-pandemic world, right? I think there are several factors that I think needs to be really kind of thought through how that would affect. One is, I think, in terms of just, I would call geopolitics, right? In terms of how nations view each other, but particularly as business people, in terms of how you think about an international business, I think will have some longer term ramifications, right? In terms of how you reach different markets and how they may feel about you, just, in terms of that. And the other thing, I think there's a whole generation now, right? That are wrestling with pandemic that will be either in the early part of the workforce or will be soon in the early part of the workforce, that I think has some very long-term ramification in terms of how they view the world and how they view work. I think, again, there's some challenges there, but there may be opportunities in terms of how you help people, that generation, really connect, right? And I think there are opportunities there, and you really got to kind of think through, I think, both during the pandemic businesses and then how that would translate into a post-pandemic set of businesses and opportunities.
Okay, thanks. James?
I think, like Bill, I think that, the world will probably go back to very similar to as it is now. Although I do believe one thing that will be changed forever is that, stimulus or bailouts or government intervention to save us whenever anything bad happens, whether it's a health crisis or, just a recession, is going to now become the norm. We've broken that. Unfortunately, I think we've broken that, laissez-faire idea, and that, the expectation now is that, even if you're not socialist, that government is there to bail us out.
Sean?
Are we talking to me, Pavan?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Post-pandemic.
No, I think that whatever happens, we're looking at a world that is going to be more digital and more remote. I'm one of those people who believes that we are social creatures and people will want to gather again and return to offices to some degree and to events and to socialize. So I don't think we're all going to live like this forever. But on the other hand, I'm certain that we're not going to reset to the way it was before. So I think a lot of how we live and how we collaborate in work is going to be more through technology than in the past, and that's going to create some lasting opportunities. I work a lot right now with arts organizations, symphonies, art schools, and all kinds of institutions like that. And they've had to pivot radically because they have no live audiences. And so every one of them almost is now doing digital instruction, digital performances. And I think it's 100% bet that they will want to get back to their live interaction, their audiences in person as soon as they possibly can. That's where the revenue comes. The revenue is not going to come anytime soon through digital activity, but every one of them, once things return to normal, they're not going to drop their digital activity. I think a lot of this is going to be embedded now for the long term.
Great. Thanks, Sean. So I just want to add in my view. I think during COVID time, during pandemic time, I think more on the startup perspective, great founders, resilient founders, consistent, not just passionate, but persistent founders survive. It's a great thing to survive during pandemic times. I mean, that's a huge accomplishment. Whether they pivoted, they continue to focus, they help their customers, found new ways to make money. I mean, everything they did, if they survived, that's a huge compliment. That means, their every aspect of their business has been tested, both on the personal side as well as on the business side. And I think post-pandemic, we will see a lot of shift. We are seeing shift towards gig economy, it does not really matter where one is located to deliver some job or deliver some value. Even companies are switching to remote working. I think there will be a lot of shift. And we are also seeing a lot of business models evolving, a lot of new technologies evolving. The way health tech has taken off through telemedicine, the remote working, the online collaboration tools. All this will disrupt many areas. And most of these disruptions would move from developed towards developing economies because of cost and what other benefits. I think we are going to see a new wave of change coming in. Obviously, we all want to go back to the older ways of life, especially on the personal side, holiday, entertainment, meeting people, socializing, all those might come back. But in the business areas, we might see quite a bit of change in terms of models and also from where these services and value get created and delivered. David, you want to add something?
That's all for now. So, did Keith finish his talk?
Sorry, what's the question? I got distracted there.
Okay, let's move on. The second question is
so I think we stop this round here now. Let's get into the pitch sessions.